Hi, I'm Emily Oliver. I am a creative writing major at Knox College in Galesburg, Illinois. And the spring before I went to Buenos Aires on our program there, I did a project where I recorded faculty and student writing and made a podcast, which is like a radio show for the internet, I would say. And all of them started like this.
Knox College Poem of the Day.
That's all we're going to listen to that. And what was interesting to me about doing that is I transferred to Knox as a sophomore and wanted to understand the place I was living, which is a school with a lot of writers, through its poetry and through the community of its poetry. So doing this project made a huge difference in terms of me finding a home at this new place, because I got to hear everyone's poetry and I got to put everyone's poetry on the internet so everyone else could hear everyone's poetry. And it was great. And it turned out that everyone was really interested, and we recorded 1 million poems. And it became like a way I really understood my college and like what kind of place my college was. So the idea of poetry as like a sense of community was really in my head when I got on the plane and went to Buenos Aires. And I should maybe start by saying that I'm awful, or was very awful at Spanish. Like I always struggled. I didn't study it in high school, but I love Juan Rufo's writing, and that was my only reason for studying Spanish, because I was like, I have to learn it well enough to be able to read A Burning Flame in Spanish. And I went to Buenos Aires thinking that's what I would do, and by luck or chance or whatever it was, the hostel we stayed in our orientation week, the woman who ran it was a poet and was speaking to someone else in my group, and they gave me the book of poetry, and I was so bad at Spanish that it took me a month to read the book, and I had to look up like every other word, and it was horrible and hard. But finally I read it and I loved it, and I drafted an email in my horrible Spanish to this poet being like, I love your book, it's like changed my life, it made me want to learn Spanish. And I told her about this project I did in the States, and I asked her if she would let me record her. And she happened to be like the coordinator of this group of Argentine poets, and was like, not only can you record me, but you can record all these poets. And that's what we ended up doing. And it was like such an interesting thing for me, because I don't think of necessarily, like you were talking about, I think it's interesting that we went right next to each other, because art as a form of like a conversation. And for me, like the conversation started when I was able to see the city through its poetry, and like it was a lens with which to understand a place. So, what else was I going to say? Oh, I went to Buenos Aires. Is this really artsy city. It's like cool and hip and fashionable. And we went to this poetry reading, which was packed to the gills, like a room as big as this, with people listening to poetry. And like that's just something in the United States that, I mean, it's happening more and more, but there was young people there was old people there, everybody, like, you know, it was a really diverse crowd, and everyone was listening to poetry. So it was just like how a different community, a different culture like has poetry, and where poetry lives in its city. It was really interesting to me too. And something I did differently from this project was I also recorded interviews with each poet, which are like an hour long, about how they feel like what poetry means in Buenos Aires. And this, I think, was like the most illuminating thing for me anyway, because I think the feeling I have in academia, where I live, is that you have to get a degree to write poetry, but almost with the exception of one poet, everyone we recorded had another job, and this is what they did, like whatever they did to support their art, to support writing poetry. And the guy we're going to listen to actually was an architect And he was very successful. He had like 3 books, and also was an architect, and also like, you know, did all these went to these poetry readings, did all these things. So like the fact that you can be an artist in conjunction with a real life, and it doesn't have to be like, it's not just this academic thing that you live with, I think is the biggest difference between the 2 poetry communities I saw. And I was just saying, actually, right before, about how it was great for me to listen before I came here, editing all the poetry files, to the first and last interviews, because my Spanish was so horrible. The first interview, like I was so embarrassed. I had to like edit all the me trying to speak Spanish out of the interview because it was just embarrassing. But by the end, like it was just like I was so in love with this project that I learned Spanish in order to do it, and like it was means to an end. So I have another. A new website. We're just going to listen to one. But yeah, I'm making an archive of all the poetry that we recorded, and this is the first try. So, let's see.
Bolita de vidrio. Una bolita de vidrio atraviesa la calle. Se pierde al llegar al cordón y un niño llora en la boca de una alcantarilla. Ya no sabe si es suya o de alguien más. Con su cabeza gacha intuye la finitud de la materia, pero no imagina con qué indiferencia giran las cosas redondas.
But what's great about this project is it works in a lot of different ways. Like for people like me who do struggle so much with the language, it's a way to familiarize myself with like the inflections and like how words function, the way people love words, the way I love words in English. I think like was the most important thing to realize, that it's like a living language, not just some horrible, tedious thing you have to study. And not that it ever is that. But what I'm gonna, I think with the scope of this project now is to study poetry, to have an archive of poetry of the Americas. Like this summer I've got funding to drive around the Midwest and study the Midwest through its poetry, and hopefully I'm just gonna travel all the way down back to South America, and it will be a map full of all these voices, and that's the plan.